Good morning, gentlemen. Wonderful time. But I have some bad news. Bad news in the sense that there has been a border clash between India and China in the eastern part of the country, that is across the McMahon line. It's been an unarmed clash, probably some fist fighting and hitting each other. And this is the first clash which has taken place after the border clash, which was a bloody one in 2020, when the Indian and the Chinese bashed each other at Galwan in Ladakh. Well, now there's been another clash close to the McMahon line near Tawang, and a few Indians have been injured, and so have been the Chinese. Now, this about shows the mindset of the Chinese. India all along has been trying not to provoke the Chinese, yet these incidents take place. And why they take place? Because there is a difference of perception on the border. Now, the Chinese say that the border, that is the McMahon line and the Johnson line, are a relic of British imperialism. We don't recognize it. India says we are the successor state to the British Raj, and we say those areas are part of India. Now, historically, as I've already pointed out in my earlier videos, these areas were never part of India for 2000 years. Aksai Chin or the Northeast Frontier Agency were not under Indian control even when Aurangzeb was ruling, or even Kanishk was there, Chandragupta was there, nobody. Ashok, no one. But the British, which had the biggest empire in world history, became the omnipotent power in Asia, and they enforced their writ at the point of the gun. They defeated the Chinese in a number of wars, and then finally called the Chinese and the Tibetans to the conference in Simla in 1913, and there this border was hammered out. Tibetans initialed and signed, Chinese didn't recognize it even at that time. Though their rep initialed and went away, but they wrote back saying, we don't accept it. So that is where it stands. When the British left India, it was incumbent on the Indian government, as the successor state which India is claiming, to look after these areas, to populate them, to set up an administration, to do something. We Indians never did anything. On top of it, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru began to champion the cause of China against the nationalists who had been defeated in the Civil War. He was perhaps in for a rude surprise when in 49 end, the Chinese invaded Tibet. And Nehru was just sitting on his haunches. And then a devil blunder was committed by Nehru, in the sense he recognized the suzerainty of China over Tibet. He did it when Tibet had been an independent entity for the last 5 decades, and the British had created it as a buffer between India and China. But that's precisely what he did. And he tied the hands of the Indians for centuries to come. Well, things were moving along because India was not aggressive. India was not building any infrastructure on the border. Chinese kept on doing the salami slicing, taking away some territory from India here and there, every time. And the Indian government was quiet. And not only that, I think when Mr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister at that time said China is a very big power and we really can't do anything to fight China. So if that is the policy you have, the chances are that you will always be on the back foot. And we have been on the back foot now for a long, long time. And the surprising part is that Mr. Narendra Modi met the Chinese President Xi 19 times before the Galwan clash, when so many Indians died, 20 of them including the full colonel. And the Chinese also suffered some casualties, but they say it's 4, but could be more. But yet, he couldn't gauge the mind of the Chinese. China, historians feel, is now aspiring to be the Middle Kingdom. It was the center of the world at one time. Chinese invented the rockets, they invented gunpowder, they invented even tea. So if you go into that sort of history, China has got an expansionist approach in life. And Jawaharlal Nehru has himself recognized it in his discovery of India when he said that a strong China is always an expansionist China. That's what he said. But he didn't himself follow what he had said. He was championing the cause of China in the Mandarin conference. He took Zhou Enlai and introduced him, not knowing that at that time the entire Aksai Chin had been taken by China. And Nehru was showing only these things in the map while we had no physical control over these areas. When India kept on claiming the Chinese had the border war in 62 and the Indians put up a good fight in Ladakh, but that's about all. There was total surrender in NEFA, that is the Northeast Frontier Agency, now Arunachal Pradesh. Tawang, where the clash had taken place, was captured by the Chinese. And they came deep into Indian territory, and they were just 30 miles from Tezpur, and there's a record that the Deputy Commissioner of Tezpur ran away. He just left his Chinese were coming, he said, I have seen my life and go. So, it's a very sad situation. Ultimately, the Chinese declared a unilateral ceasefire and they withdrew, left all the areas in NEFA and went back. At that time, the Chinese policy was a lot different from what it is now. In 59, Chinese had offered India an agreement, a border settlement. And what was that border settlement they had offered? They had said, we will recognize the McMahon line. You recognize Aksai Chin as part of China. Let's have a quid pro quo. But Nehru, in his dreams, didn't accept it. One has not been able to analyze why he did that, because he was a leader, and if he had decided, it would have gone through. The army chief, General Thimayya, at that time was very keen that this ought be accepted, because he knew the limitations of the Indian army in fighting in these high altitude areas. Anyway, that's gone. The offer came again in 83, and again nothing happened. And after that, China's situation has hardened. We have President Xi, who's harking back to the time when China was a superpower during the Middle Ages, the Middle Kingdom. And now, even the Americans, as you know, are very wary of China. They're just wondering what's going to happen to us. Joe Biden spent 3 hours with Xi during the recent conference in Indonesia. Nothing came of it, of course. And now again, an entire American delegation has gone to China to prepare the grounds for the visit of Mr. Blinken, the Secretary of State, to China. So it's quite different. And India is not India on the back foot. Crown Prince Salman, who was to visit India, cancelled his visit and he hosted the Chinese, and with the Chinese President Xi signed up a whole host of agreements. So we have to think over, because we have nothing to give to the other nations comparatively to what China can do. Let's accept the fact that 75% of most goods in electronics, chips and others are made in China for the world. India has a trade deficit of $100 billion with China. America has got a deficit of $400 billion with China. Americans can only fight by proxy Russia, which they have created an artificial enemy, not realizing that Russia could have been their ally. But they haven't thought about it. But at the same time, they want to make an accommodation with China. And this is America's big weakness. If you recollect, the entire South China Sea was handed over by Clinton and the presidents who went. And President Duterte, what did he say? He said that if America was serious with the South China Sea, they would have sent 5 aircraft carriers there and the situation would have been solved. America didn't do it because they wanted to placate China. They thought they'll rule the world with China, but China doesn't want anything. China wants that America will become subservient to China. So in such a scenario, the Indians who lack geopolitical ambition to be the dominate the world, and Indian leadership keeps on harping, we have never attacked anybody. Oh, that's not a great thing. You didn't attack anybody, but you got attacked every time and you got defeated. Now that part, the second part, you didn't attack, good. I would say that's nice. But when others attacked, you were defeated. Muhammad Ghazni invaded India 17 times and every time he won. The so-called Maratha power were decimated in the Battle of Panipat, the third battle, 1761. And everywhere it's been the same sad story. Because basically the inhabitants of this country, whether they are Hindus or Muslims, they lacked ambition. They lacked the firepower to go and dominate the world. Sometimes I wonder, Vasco da Gama came in a voyage all the way from Portugal to Calicut. But no Indian never thought of going there, and we keep on talking of great naval tradition. We never had a naval tradition at all. China is a different kettle of fish. The Chinese are very ambitious. They want to dominate the world, and they cannot allow India to rise up. That is the reason they are friends with Pakistan, which is India's enemy. In one of my videos, I had earlier said that India will not and Pakistan will not fight. I don't think there will be a war, but there will be a war with China. Because the Chinese are building up infrastructure across the border, airfields, runways, ammunition depots, and their army is in aggressive mood. Galwan was a clash which the Chinese engineered. They came fully prepared, and the Indians were not prepared. That's why 20 Indians died, including the colonel, which is very sad. And same thing is now similarly in the clash now at Tawang. Something similar appears to be the case, because the perception between both the countries is different on the line of control. That is the line of actual control, which the Chinese call it, the LAC. They don't recognize the border with India. India may keep making any amount of maps, so the Chinese don't recognize it. And what is the next issue? What are we going to do? What is India going to do? It is very important for India to have an accommodation with China. And that accommodation, as I've already said, has to be now on the Chinese term, because the horse has bolted and the 59 proposal is now dead and gone. There could be a war with China, certainly, because the Indian leadership has still not appreciated the fact that in a total war with China, the loser is India. Invariably, 99 cases out of 100. Why? Because the Indian population centers are close to the border, just about 100 miles away, and they can be easily bombed, while the Chinese population centers are almost 2,000 to 3,000 miles away. We don't have the means to go and bomb an area that distance away. So that's why we keep on thinking that we will be relying with America to contain China. We have the Quad, Australia, Japan along, and USA, which is again a paper tiger. Because now these countries have a border with China. India is the only country that has a border with China. And in case there's a war with China, Australia and Japan and all the countries are miles away, America. And the fighting will be with India. And in a total war, I'm not talking of a nuclear war. Nuclear war, let's forget it. It's not going to take place. I don't think so. But in a conventional war, you will be exposing the entire Indian population. That's what Ghuliat Dahut had said. And I hope our air chief has studied Ghuliat Dahut. He knows the limitations of fighting China. Gentlemen, we must now be very wary of what's happening. The Chinese are in an aggressive mood, but they are in problems. And that is why they could resort to a military adventure. The people they are arresting, you have seen how spontaneous it was, the agitation in China against the COVID restrictions. That is a fact. So China could start a military adventure just to placate the local population and say, look, we are doing this, and all that. These are the tactics adopted by dictatorial states, or for that matter, any political leadership. And in India, we are still talking about ancient things. Somebody talking about Ram Rajya, somebody talking something else. We haven't been able to enforce even one civil code in India. I want to know in which country in the world you have two civil codes. Take any Muslim country, any country in the world, and tell me there are two civil codes there. India is the one exception. Gentlemen, I hope the leadership will move forward. We have a very sagacious Prime Minister in Narendra Modi, we expect him to act. And I hope he will look forward to a settlement with China. It's up to his negotiating skills what he can get out of the Chinese, who are past masters at evasion, confusion, and other things. Okay, gentlemen, I close now. Do subscribe to this channel, share it with your friends, and I wish you all the best. Jai Hind. God bless you all.